let's welcome our first speaker, Sharon A.
Welcome, CODA family, and thank you for letting me be of service. I have been in CODA for 14 years, and I've done service and still do service at the world level. And I was just voted in to be chair of the Events World Committee. And so I'm excited about that, but I want to share gratitude about CODA and how it saved my life like everybody else's. And it's still saving my life 14 years later. I know I'm in the right place. I am being timed, right? I know exactly the gratitude that's led me to where I am here with you. I've been married since 1977. I was only 21 at the time, and I had 2 kids. And I was married to an okay man, but, wasn't in love with him. And I had so many anger issues growing up, codependent issues, and it was never me, it was everybody else. Anyway, needless to say, I left him because I found the man I love more than anything in the world. And that was back in 1988. So I was still pretty young, probably about 30 years old, and I'd been married to him for 35 years. Well, needless to say, without CODA, I wouldn't learn how to get away from my second husband. I realized I was so in love with him, it was an addiction, and I cared more about him than myself. So, of course, if I didn't love myself, we all know where that goes from there. And I had a dysfunctional family, but they stayed married, and my parents always loved me. My mother cheated on my father. So, there's dysfunction there. My mother took me with her when she did have her boyfriend. It was the same one, but that's where I realized my codependency started so young. So back to my husband. 35 years, he helped me raise my kids, and I always knew that he was cheating on me. But I didn't think enough about myself, and I didn't want to believe it. No, I know how other people felt, but inside, I knew he was cheating on me. We even went to a therapist, and the therapist even said, "You're crazy. Your mother's cheated and taken you with you. You're paranoid." And I don't think so. He was very flirtatious in front of me. Women would say things very insulting to me. I used to be 270 pounds. So it was very easy to intimidate me and insult me. "Oh my God, your wife is so heavy." Well, most of my life, I was obese and heavy. And that's another gratitude that I have from God. It's up to us how we want to live our life, even if we don't have as fast a metabolism as somebody else. So for the first 19 years, I was married to the love of my life. He was hitting up on women under 18. He was losing jobs because he was inappropriate. He was cheating on me everywhere he possibly could. And he did it at work. So he's home weekends and home evenings. And I always felt that. But for some reason, just like everybody else trapped in that, I didn't want to believe it. I needed the proof. Well, September 30th, 2008, it was September 13th, 2008. My son turned 30 years old. I had 30 people in my backyard. We were having a wonderful party. Everybody, friends and family were there. When my husband decides to pick up on my niece because she's a stripper. So my niece comes out screaming and ew, and totally the whole party went to shit in a handbasket, at least for me. I hid in my bedroom and I didn't know what to do with that pain. At that time, I had my validation, and that was with my niece, and she ran out. And somehow he managed to still blame me. We always knew I was a cheat, and you put up with it. I left him. I didn't know what to do with myself at that time. I didn't know what to do with the pain. I had no brains, just heart. And that's when I walked into Coda like everybody else does, right in the verge of wanting to drive straight off a freeway cliff. So he went to SAA, admitted to me all the problems he had when he was younger, and I came to Coda. And I learned to love myself. And I didn't before. I learned to respect myself. I learned to trust my own decisions. And it came 35 years later. If I didn't see what was happening, I would have been on forensics. When he stopped cheating, he was totally narcissistic. And he was bullying me. He was threatening me verbally. Everything I knew that was emotional abuse. And he was manipulating, controlling, and very scary. And so I left him in June 2021 because he started to get physical. He grabbed me by my throat. He said to me, shut the fuck up or I'm going to shut you the fuck up. And here I'm 65 years old running a conference and he's doing this to me. And I knew better at this time. And I left. And I left to stay with my friend. And he begged and he cried and he begged and he cried. And it was different this time. I was over the cheating, the lying. I loved myself more than him. I went back with him. We bought a trailer. We were going to, both of us retired, travel. We had our whole life set up, money set up. We were taken care of. I wasn't even back with him for 3 weeks. We went to Pennsylvania and Philadelphia at his daughter's November 10th. So it's almost been in an exact year. And he flipped out. He was calling me a fucking bitch in front of my grandchildren. And I did not know what I asked about dog bones. And he flipped out. I don't even want to pretend what was going on in his head. And I was really upset he did that. And I went down into, they have a basement there, and that was the room we were staying in. When he pushed me so hard, I had a heater behind my legs. I went flying backwards. Thought I was dead right then and there because the heater was behind me. And he grabbed me below my waist and pulled me up by my back. And he herniated L2 and 3 and 4 of my back. But he didn't even stop there so he could say I was helping you. He picked me up and crushed every one of my ribs. They were also bruised. We did not know which ones were cracked and which ones weren't. And then he took my toes and twisted them this way and that way and broke my 2 toes. I was flipping out. I called the paramedics. I called the police. And I was pretty much dumped. His daughter said, how can you embarrass us all like that? And I couldn't move. And the paramedic said, I don't want you to fly because you can die. And I wanted to go home. Well, I Ubered it to the urgent care. Their x-ray machine was broken. So, and then I Ubered it to the hospital. Nobody take me. As far as they were concerned, I could have walked home from Pennsylvania. And I live in Southern California. I had the will of God. And then I Ubered it to the hospital, waited 4 hours and said, this is ridiculous. The pain was getting worse. So I called an Uber. I had an 8 o'clock flight. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was an hour away. He happened to be somebody that was brand new to the country with a brand new job and didn't know where the airport was and took me on a 4-hour Twilight Zone ride is the only way that I could put it. And we drove around New Jersey 4 times. And all I did at that time was right in the back seat of his taxi, cried, "Dear Lord, I need you now." And he pulls over to the side of the street and cries too. That wasn't helping me. Anyway, I get to the airport 10 minutes before the flight's leaving. She said, "You missed your flight. And you have to sit on the chair there and get another flight." Well, I broke down and cried hysterically. And I said, "I'm going through spousal abuse." And that was it. The warm hand of God came over me. I had this beautiful Black lady that said, "Honey, no way, you wait right here." She had the embassy suite, come and get me, let me have her room. She booked me for another flight out the next morning, did not charge me, made the man that was helping her lift my bag. I had a 50-pound bag with me. I was able to shower. I was able to eat the next morning. She put me on first class. And from then on in, God has been with me, and everybody as an angel in my life that I'm seeing everywhere. I sent her 24 roses and told her she was my angel. I told her she was my angel before I left, and I found her. That was my first glim of hope. Well, he served me with divorce before I could serve him. And he also went after me for domestic abuse, which I'm still waiting right now, what I'm being accused of. But I have all the legal documentation from out here from my doctors. And I had a complete CAT scan, so I knew exactly what was wrong with me. And for 6 months, I couldn't move. But I was so happy and okay alone. If it wasn't for Coda, I would have walked home from Philadelphia, because that's how I had the will and the trust of God. And in the past year, I had to surrender everything in my life. All the money's gone to my higher power, because I don't know what the hell's going to happen. And I'm at the end hoping that we're either going to settle or we're going to domestic violence court after a year later, which he has nothing on me and I have a lot on him. I leave it all on God. But I asked God, I've prayed for God. I had an inheritance in an apartment building. I prayed, don't let me lose that. I also prayed, he was coming after me for $5,000 a month for me to spousal support him. And I prayed, couldn't do that. And God answered all my prayers. I even said, God, I'd love to be the chair of the events committee, whether I know where I'm going or not. And my God, he set it up. I'm also a SoCal delegate that got me to World, and God's just handling everything. And I could not have dealt with this, taking 6 months to heal and wanting so desperately to go through that light in the tunnel, which I'm not yet in. But I count my blessings and my gratitude. I'm starting to breathe life in me now. It's the first time I've shared, so I can share about the gratitude. He is in the rear view mirror so far behind him, he's a dot. And I even asked God one more thing. I want to keep my house. My mom bought me this house. And the apartment buildings were for me in an inheritance. And that's where I he wanted me to sell the house, but he hid my taxes from me. So I didn't qualify. By the time he did give me my 2020 taxes, I can't qualify, and it's 7%. So I am now fighting for my house. And we have a settlement on the table because we have other property that I am giving him free and clear. So he could, whatever he could do with his life is up to him, and he could do with what he wants. I didn't feel good about making him homeless. I didn't feel good about, I don't want revenge. I know he's sick puppy. I've read some of his things that he's journaled. He knows it. He knows exactly what he did and what's wrong with him. And he says in his own letters to himself that he's screwed up. and he doesn't know what to do with it. Well, for 14 years, I can't take the blunt end of that pain that he has and suffering. I know. Now I watch forensics. 14 years ago, when he cheated on me, I had to watch Cheaters. I wanted to know, why did all these people have to get cameras and have proof when they know? I had to watch every Cheaters until I got it out of my system and knew it wasn't me. So why do that to yourself? And now I watch forensics, which I really like, but I know it's because I would have ended up there. I see the similarity. Some have been married for many years, and it's always been dysfunctional with me. Every party I've had, every wedding I've had, everywhere he's ruined for me emotionally by bullying me, making me cry. What took me so long? Well, I had to forgive myself for that 6 months that I laid there with broken bones. But yet I had to forgive myself and say, would you have walked from Philadelphia or flew home and got God's help? And I am right now in the driver's seat, which has nothing to do with making me feel good. It's just my prayers and my higher power are with me. And right now, that's all I can concentrate on is getting healthy again. I've been swimming. I've been diving back into Coda, which I never really left. And I walk because, again, I was very obese. So no, I'm not a muscle lady, but I mean, I will walk 4 or 5 miles and I'll swim like a dog, maybe on a noodle, but I move. And I healed. My lower back, L2, 3, and 4, they healed because I lost that weight with Coda, loving myself and caring about myself. When I turned 60, I became a swan. If I showed you guys pictures of me, even in my 30s and 40s, you'd say, hell no. I look older. I'm so much heavier. You can't recognize me. And, I realized it was a curse. I didn't never blame myself. My younger brother ate like I did, and he was skinny. But I do know if I was cursed with anything, it was a slow metabolism. So thank you, Dakota. I am so grateful. I did the 30th annual CODA convention in person with the founders, and I had spiritual awakenings all night long, even shooting stars. I'm addicted to CODA, the love that I get from everybody, the health that I feel inside, my higher powers warmth carrying me through this. And I am just so happy to be able to share with you the gratitude and share with you what I've just been through, because without the gratitude, without surrendering to our higher power, and I mean surrender, if we're dwelling on it constantly, we're not letting go. We're just trying to change the outcome. I won't do that anymore. I had enough recovery to help me this year, and I am so grateful. And I am so thankful that I am looking forward to how any amount of years that I have left, I want to have fun. I want to live life like I was taught. And that's what I'm doing. And thank you all for letting me share with you this experience. Thank you. And yes, it is so tough to be in a bad relationship. The best way that I could describe this last year, I lived in the moment. I meditated. I lived one day at a time, very tightly. I wrote everything down that I had to do so I wasn't overwhelmed.
Let's please welcome our second speaker, Eric B.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eric. I'm codependent. I began in CODA on April 22nd, 2021. It was after I separated from my wife on August 1st, 2020. We'd been married for 22 years. And the last 3 years had gotten pretty rough. I was in graduate school attempting to finish my doctoral degree, and understandably so, my ex-wife was done with me at that point in time. Sharon, thank you so much for your share. It was so powerful. It resonated with me in that I too came from a marriage, and this is what got me in Coda, that was abusive. My ex was verbally abusive with me, and I hope this doesn't trigger anyone, but I did engage in some, I can admit it, with some physical abuse with her in terms of grabbing and different types of things, because I was very afraid of losing my ex. I had made her my higher power. And I was actually the one who called the marriage off because I chose finishing up, I chose my career over the marriage. And I felt so much shame about that, that over the next couple months, I lost pretty much the will to live. As we talk about in Coda, that there's I'm no longer learning to survive, I'm also learning to live life. And that's where I was at. And luckily, I had a friend who just happened to be the house that I moved into after leaving my wife, my ex. The house that I moved into, I rented a room in a house because I had nothing but these books behind me, and the clothes on the shirt on my back. And there was a person that lived in that house that was in Coda, and I had no idea that Coda even existed until then. And that's when I realized that I do have a higher power, and my higher power is looking out for me, and brought me to this moment in my life. And so that's how I got into Coda. But through Coda, I've realized that I've been a codependent my entire life. In fact, I'm coming to realize that I was kind of raised in a codependent culture, in an industrial town in the Midwest. And I wasn't abused as a child or anything like that. My father was completely emotionally distant. He was a Vietnam vet. He was drafted into Vietnam. Still to this day, his idea of emotional awareness is not feeling your emotions unless they're happy emotions, and just pushing them away, and just burying all those experiences that he had in Vietnam. He's only been able to talk about it recently in the last couple of years, actually within the last year, kind of coincidentally with my divorce and me talking to him about my codependency. So there's been that's happened. My mom was, and I also, from my father, I need to say, I learned avoidance, how to avoid emotions, which is kind of my MO. And this is part of, I mean, my ex-wife and I were completely enmeshed, but my avoidance was the thing that really kind of put a wedge in our, at least from her perspective, in our marriage. My emotional unavailability, and just the fact that I even have emotions, I wasn't able to understand until I got into Coda. My mother really pushed us as children, my sister and I, to be hard workers and to be self-reliant, as my father did as well. But part of her tactic for that, is something that I just realized, is that she would always tell me how. So she had a best friend that had gone into labor 5 days before she did, and so her son was born just before me, and so there was always this comparison that my mom would do, that so and so can tie his shoes now, so and so can read now, so and so can do this now. And I just developed out of that. I just developed this idea that I'm not good enough and I'm always behind, and I have to work harder and harder to get where I need to be in life. And also that I'm kind of not good enough. And I did my share of building upon that with my own thinking, over the 46 years of my life, this is something that I've worked towards, is that type of mentality. At least 44 years, the 2 years, or the year that I've been in CODA since I was 45, I've started to try to undo some of that. And so, yeah, and in just growing up in that industrial town, you were just kind of, it was solidified that you're not good enough and that you do need to keep working harder to be better. And as a result, I became a workaholic. I worked in factories for 12 years, and then I got out of that and decided that I wanted to get into academia. And so which was insane, but it was because my ex-wife had decided that she wanted to get into academia, and it was kind of something that we decided to do together. And so, yeah. So this idea of not being good enough and always trying to work harder at being more was something that controlled me. And my codependency manifests itself in other ways. But this is something that I've been working on lately and trying to understand, is this constant feeling of lack, is the way that I refer to it. That there's always something that's lacking, that I'm not good enough. And I've heard others refer to it as scarcity. Working the steps with my sponsor, I've started to forgive myself. I've started to grow in self-esteem in some ways, started to feel good about myself, but there's still this idea of loneliness. I am completely alone right now. Well, not completely alone. I'm never completely alone. I have my higher power. I know that. And I also have this fellowship. But in terms of where I live 200 miles away from my closest friends because of a new job that I got, which I'm very, very thankful for, but I'll get to that in a minute. And there's still this constant fear that I'm not good enough. My future's rather uncertain. I have a 1-year position in the job that I currently have. And so I'm afraid. I have to deal with this fear regularly, that I don't know what my future holds. And this has been going on now for more than a couple of years now, for roughly 5 or 6 years working on this degree. But through CODA, through working the steps, especially 4 through 9, like I said, with my sponsor, I've developed some skills. I've developed some tools, and talk about thankful, right? This is what I am most thankful for. And so every morning I get up and I meditate. I do a little workout first, actually, and then I meditate. And then I pray a certain prayer. I journal, and then I go for a walk where I talk with God, my higher power. It's just a small routine. It only takes about an hour, but I do it every day on a regular basis. And then I go to 2 meetings a week. I make those meetings when I can. And through that, I've developed kind of an ability to just maintain, to just deal with these feelings on a regular basis and to work through some of this stuff. I also talk to my sponsor on a weekly basis. I have trouble setting up time to just call whenever I need it. So instead, what we've worked out, because I don't feel like I still don't, after a year of this, I still don't feel like I can just reach out whenever I need it, because that goes against my self-reliance. But I've set up this weekly maintenance thing with my sponsor. And through these practices, though, I mean, there's the light at the end of the tunnel with all this. And this is what I want to share with everyone. And this is where my share goes a little divergent from shares that I usually share, is that I've come to learn gratitude in a whole new way. And I've learned it through sharing it, or not sharing it, but learning through people sharing with me in the fellowship, and also through my sponsor. And so I want to now take the last couple minutes of my share to share with you what I've learned in terms of my strength and hope that I've gained from all of you and your sharing with me. And so through these tools that I know a lot of you do as well, I had a moment where during my meditation, I heard this voice in my head. It was my own voice, but I heard it tell me, what more do you have to do? Or what more do I have to do to show you that you have everything that you need, that you are good enough, that you've achieved the goals that you wanted to achieve? What more is there that you actually want in life? And when I heard this thought pop into my mind, like it just came out of nowhere, I laughed at myself. And I just felt this overwhelming feeling of gratitude. And I do think that it was my higher power that was giving me this gift of gratitude in that moment. And so for me, I went on this because I over intellectualize stuff. I don't feel stuff at first. I always over intellectualize stuff. And so I investigated in my own assessment of what I thought gratitude was. Is it this feeling that, I feel grateful? This is the way that I've kind of been learned or been taught to feel gratitude. And so in that way, it's kind of a relief, right? Like the example I can think of is I'm grateful that I was mistaken about something having to take place today that I was stressed about, and it's not taking place today. And so that poses gratitude as this sense of relief. But the way that I've come to think of gratitude is not as a feeling, not as a state of being, but as a practice. And so thinking about gratitude, I thought about how I learned about what gratitude is. And I think that the way that we learn about what gratitude is from like our parents telling us when we're given something, we're taught to say thank you. And so over time, we learn that it feels good to reciprocate with others in this giving and receiving of thanks and things that we do for one another. This is a practice that gives us joy, or can give us joy. And so the reason why I like to think of this as a practice is because something that my sponsor shared with me a long time ago and that I want to share with you, it comes from this idea of I struggled with this notion of a higher power. There's a lot of different reasons why, which I don't have time to go into, and I'm not going to go into. But my sponsor told me this idea of just you push the believe button over and over again. You just go through the motions. In graduate school, we called it you fake it till you make it. And so that's what I did, and it worked. There was also my sponsor told me that happiness is a choice and that I can choose to be happy. And so I've worked with this affirmation of today, I choose happiness. I've said this affirmation to myself more times than I can comprehend. And I really do feel like I've become a happier person as a result of doing that. And so one of my most favorite people in the world is she works in theater. She also teaches theater or performance arts at the university, and she's struggling with her students because they don't want to partake in some of these exercises. And what she told them is fun is a choice. You choose to have fun. And scientific research has even shown that just by laughing, even if you don't really feel that something's funny, if you just fake laughter, you're going to feel better. That serotonin is going to be released in your brain. And so in the same way, I think that gratitude is a choice. And so what I've begun practicing is just to decide to feel grateful, to feel a sense of joy that God has provided for me. I can choose to focus on the shit that my life is filled with and some of the things that I still have to deal with. And we're all dealing with shit in our lives. But I can choose to feel grateful every day for what I have. And it does bring me this sense of joy. And this notion of scarcity and lack that was embedded in me as a child. When I talk about gratitude, there's the person who got me into doing this talk for today through shares has taught me this idea of abundance, and that we can sense abundance in our lives. And that we can have abundance in our lives instead of scarcity or lack. I still feel loneliness, and I feel on a weird level that I'm incapable or even desiring or wanting to do anything about it. I feel like I have a lack of job security. I feel afraid for my future, all this notion of lack and stuff, but I can also choose to feel grateful for what I have and what I've been able to do in life. And when I do choose to feel grateful, when I wake up and I make that choice to feel grateful, that's when I have this notion of abundance in my life. For choosing to feel grateful. And that's the gift of gratitude that I've come to find in Coda, and I've come to find through all of you. And that's what I needed to share today with all of you. Thank you. Yeah, that's an incredible question. And one that's really important, at least for me in my journey, is that no, it doesn't come all of a sudden. It doesn't come immediately after you do it. At least in my experience, I don't have those types of peak experiences in my life. Again, it's about maintenance. It's just about doing it every day, stacking days together. And over time, something changes. And as some people who have guided me in my program have told me before, like these changes start to happen that you don't even realize are happening to you. And I think that that's one of the things that has happened for me, is that I've started to feel a little bit more, just this underlying sense of joy. And I don't know about you, but when I'm beating myself up and when that inner critic is going and when I don't feel like I'm good enough, I self-sabotage and I ruin my life. And I make really bad decisions. And so it's not that Coda or having gratitude suddenly makes your life more successful or you suddenly become happier, but there's just these slow changes where you become more your authentic self. And we talk about that all the time in Coda. And that's what I get from it. It's just one more tool in the tool chest. Yeah, and I still feel sad afterwards too. It's just kind of something that I have to accept and just allow to slowly get better in my life. That's such a great question. Yeah, forgiveness is something I struggle with, because I did I did the cardinal sin. Like, I put my hands on the woman I love most in the world. And that's difficult. I mean, it wasn't quite like what was explained earlier in the first share. It wasn't anything. I mean, not that I'm justifying it. Now I feel like I'm justifying it, so I'm just going to drop it at that. Yeah, and it's really hard to forgive myself for that. I come from a passive family where we didn't do a lot of anger. Anger was never expressed. It would pop out on my dad sometimes when bad stuff would happen. He would just have these outbursts. But other than that, he was a very passive man. And my ex used to call me a very passive man, and that she wanted me to show feelings. And for her, where she comes from, feelings were anger. For me, it was happiness. That was the only feeling you were allowed to feel. For her, it was anger. And so she was the rageaholic that would stomp her feet and she would, I'm sorry, but she would call me the fact that you called this a woman's disease, she would call me a little bitch because it would bother me when she would rage against me. And I just kept it in and kept it in and kept it in until I would pop. And so anyway, in saying that, forgiveness, yeah, is really hard to come by. It's what I'm working on. And the self-love thing and the forgiveness, steps 4 through 9 have kept me alive. And yeah, but forgiveness is something I'll always be working on, I'm sure, self-forgiveness. Thank you for that.
Okay, I want to thank you very much, Eric, for your share. I still feel your pain and your worry and the word fear. And you haven't been in Coda that long, but yet you're already on the right road. And from experience, strength, and hopes, I would like to share with you, keep going with your steps. I was a sponsor for years, and I worked on step 4, all the way from their personal problems to each mother, father, sister's husband, So you recognize you need to peel that onion. You need to forgive yourself. And it actually comes naturally when you work the steps. I've done it so many times, and even work the 12 promises. And I even went further and did the promises and the traditions, because by the time we went to the promises, they understood it a little bit. So I want to just encourage you. You're in the right place. You're doing the right thing. Forgive yourself and feel that love all around you. And the hardest thing to do is to surrender and let God take over. But that comes with the steps, everything, and just going this through the steps, the traditions, it just came naturally. So I just want to give you the bit of advice, and I'm going to pray for you. I want you, how cool is that? Stay strong, stay close to your higher power, stay with us. We're a beautiful Coda family, and that helps too. I'm just so excited for you because you're starting your journey, and embrace it. Thank you, Eric, for your share. It was beautiful.
Thank you so much, Sharon.
It's time for our third speaker, and we're going to bring on Cary H. Please welcome Cary H.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Cary, and I am a codependent, and I love when somebody said trying to recover from codependency. So that's what I'm doing today. I have been in CODA for about 2.5 years, all on Zoom, and there's a part in the one of the readings, and I wasn't paying attention today, so I missed the beginning, but it says something about people in CODA came from dysfunctional families or abusive families. And then there's a little phrase that says, some of us were not. And that is one of the most important parts of all the readings for me, because I have so many codependent patterns. In fact, going through the codependent patterns, before I got into the program, I found I qualify for 53 of the 56 ones. But I'm one of those who did not come from that kind of a family. And if that clause, some of us were not, was not posted, I'm not sure I would feel like I belong. And I know I belong because no matter what my background, I suffer from codependency. And I also I won't talk about them, but I will mention I'm a member of several other 12-step programs, and all through my recovery in those programs, I kept trying to find out, why am I like this? Why am I addicted to so many things? And it wasn't until I got into CODA that I found out, I think I have all these other issues because I'm codependent. And for me, it finally made sense. It finally made sense why I turned to other things. I suffer from low self-esteem, and sometimes I would say, well, I can't compare my high self-esteem or low self-esteem because I didn't have any. And I will talk about, there's just so many things that I can say that I'm grateful for about CODA. But I'll start with a little bit of history about my family and how I grew up. Now, although I say I didn't come from that kind of background, the longer I'm in CODA and working the steps, the more I find out that, oh, there's some dysfunction in my family. So I feel more and more like, yeah, I do belong, and my family belongs. And my 90-year-old father asked me recently, well, what is codependency? And I wanted to say, oh, you would benefit, because he's a very loving, kind-hearted person, but he does suffer from some codependency. So the family I grew up in was, I always say we look good on the outside. I'm the oldest of 4 girls. My parents had pretty strict boundaries. I'm the oldest of 4, and I always followed the rules. I think my parents had pretty fair boundaries. Now I look back and I think they were fair. Of course, I didn't think so at the time. And during my growing up years, I followed the directions. It didn't occur to me to rebel, but found that I always wanted more. Throughout my life, I wanted more clothes, I wanted more food, I wanted more things. And then later I wanted more alcohol, I wanted more drugs, I wanted more sex, I wanted more love. And I think my codependency really started when I was about 12. I had, I consider that I was immature. That's not to say that the kids who are my age were doing things that I would consider mature now, but I definitely was a little behind in some of the things that were going on. I was very much a follower. I had a best friend for 12 years, and we just marveled the fact that we never got in fights. And I realized later in CODA that we never got in fights because I just did whatever she wanted. I didn't have an opinion for myself. And if I did, I didn't say anything. I didn't have, if somebody asked me, well, what do you want to eat? Well, I don't know. What do you want to eat? What movie do you want to see? Whatever you want to see. And since coming into CODA, it's like I'm just now discovering that I can answer truthfully. I can actually, let's say there's a movie I want to see. I can actually say what movie I want to see. And I'm experimenting with, looking at that other person. It's like, is that important? And, I feel like I'm brand new in CODA. I've gone through all 12 steps. I did the 14 questions first. I'm co-facilitating a study group with women who are on their 6th step. And yet I still feel like I'm brand new because this is about my whole life. It's not just about a substance, which is important also. I followed many of the CODA patterns and characteristics. Like I said, I have 53 out of 56 of them, but I didn't see it at the time. Very, very strong people pleaser, and which I thought I was really sad when I heard that that's not a good quality. So now I like to look, I am somebody who cares about people, but I took it to the extreme, and I would do things like giving my keys to people, maybe my car, my credit cards. My sponsor told me that I took men hostage, meaning that I would say, you can stay with me, and here's the key, here's a credit card, and come live with me, I'll take care of you. And of course, the men that I did that with took advantage of that fact. I did that also with female friends, in that, I would value their friendship so much that I would stifle them, and I'd be really sad when our friendships would end. I definitely didn't think I was good enough. One thing I've discovered in doing my steps was that I think I passed up several relationships with men who were interested in me, but I only wanted the ones that weren't available. So definitely that pattern of pull people towards me and then push them away. And it was because of my insecurities. I had no boundaries for myself or for others. And if I did have a boundary, I always thought, well, people take advantage of my boundaries. They step all over me. And now I'm finding that I'm the one who allows people to step on my boundaries, to cross my boundaries. So the next part, I got into recovery from drugs and alcohol. I got in recovery for food, and didn't discover CODA, like I said, until the pandemic. So a couple of you have heard this story, but it's my story of how my CODA journey began. It was right at the beginning of the pandemic. I had been asked to speak on a Zoom meeting. Or no, I'm sorry. I came on a meeting where somebody else was speaking, and he noticed something in the background from his country and made a comment about it. We kind of got to be friends in the meeting, and one of my amends to society is not to flirt with other people's husbands or boyfriends. And so I wasn't flirting with him, but I felt like we were exchanging emails, and I wanted to let his wife find out if that was okay with his wife. So I emailed her. I had met her online too, and she said, that's fine. And then I knew that she was the secretary of a CODA meeting. So I went on it just to get to know her. And as soon as the patterns and characteristics were read of a codependent, I sat there with my mouth wide open, I'm sure, going, oh my gosh, that's me. And that is where my recovery in CODA has started off. So I'm going to move on to some gratitudes. I think I've done service in CODA. I've secretaried a CODA meeting. I've done the Zoom host. And like was said earlier, being a part of CODA service has helped me so much. I go to so many meetings that sometimes I feel okay, but turning my picture off and just listening. Other ones I'm sitting face to face where I can be seen. One of the biggest things, call it a promise or gratitude, is I feel like I'm finding myself. I'm finding that I can be a person of value. I feel like I have some confidence. And like I said earlier, when somebody asks my opinion, I'm just getting to where I'm comfortable to say to say. And I think, why did they ask me if they don't want to know? It's like, well, they do want to know. And it's kind of new for me. And just during the meeting, I had somebody text me and ask me to do something. And usually I'd be like, okay, I'll do it. It's like, I'm on a meeting. I'll call you after. And for me to do that and feel okay about it is just, it kind of just makes me, I don't know, makes me just blink and think, is that me? I think, and one of the things that I love at meetings, at the end of some of the meetings I'm on, we do the affirmations. And as soon as I read an affirmation out loud, or I hear somebody else, those are promises to me. And I'll read a few of those if I have time. So one of the things that I'm really grateful for is where CODA helped me. I believe that CODA helped me save my marriage. My husband was diagnosed with cancer right after we both retired in 2020. And he's very self-sufficient, but there are some things in his treatment that he would have needed help with. So we sat down and I said, you tell me, and I, of course, talked to the sponsor first, let me know what you want help with. And he said his boundary was, you can ask me how I'm doing, but if I need help, I'll ask you. And it was such a relief, because I'm the kind of person that would have been hovering around him constantly. I would have driven him crazy. And and he's fine now, by the way. He had a treatable cancer. And, the challenge for me was to let him take care of himself as much as he wanted to. And I was there to drive him to appointments and to help in any way I could, but it was up to him to ask. And I've been able to do that with family now, with my own children are 21 and 23, and I want to tell them what to do. But it's such a freedom to know that they can handle themselves. They're adults. If they need help, they know where to come. And it just gives me such freedom and gives them independence, and we're very close. I've made amazing friendships in this program, and I'd say 90% of the friendships, maybe 95% of the friendships I've made are on Zoom. There's one special person on this meeting who I know personally. I've met her personally, and then I have other special people on this meeting who I haven't met in person. And but I just love everybody, and I have just gotten so much from CODA. It's just been an incredible experience. This was mentioned on another meeting I heard, and it's also in the reading that in CODA, I'm learning to live life, not just survive. And that's kind of what I was doing through parts. Something I have in common with the other two speakers is I was in an abusive relationship for 4 years, and it really bothered me that I couldn't leave. It took him leaving and moving across the country. And somebody said, maybe that was your higher power doing for you what you couldn't do yourself. And so I was able to let go of that resentment towards myself. But I look back on that relationship and the things that I allowed and that I did myself. I'd like to say I wouldn't, but I haven't been there. So I'm nearly positive I would not be in that kind of situation again. I'm part of a group that does gratitudes each night. I write down 3 gratitudes and then 1 concern if I have it, and it's a texting group. And I really feel like it keeps me accountable and it keeps me focusing on gratitude. And gratitude's always my favorite topic. So when I was asked to speak on gratitude, I think I can do that. So on the patterns in recovery, I highlighted some about my feelings are valid and important. I know the difference between caring and caretaking. I can express my feelings openly. And here's a big one. I trust my ability to make effective decisions. My husband, this is a whole nother story. My husband right now is in a 30-day treatment for alcoholism. And he's worried about who's going to pay the bills. And I said, well, I can do that. Who's going to do this and who's going to do that? Well, I can do that. And I know I can. I've done it before. And let's see, I accept myself as I am. I've always wanted to be better. And I'm happy with who I am today. And with CODA, I can still grow, but I don't have to compare myself to anybody else. I have confidence in myself. And I feel I'm a lovable and valuable person. I consider my interests and feelings when asked to participate in another's plans. That one is really big for me. And to believe that they really want to know what I want. That's a big one too. One that I'm working on, which is difficult sometimes, is I give advice only when asked. And that's often with my children. Sometimes they don't want my opinion or to tell them what to do. So that's one I'm working on when it's appropriate to give advice. And then on the the positive affirmations of recovery, if you've seen that list, it's just, I don't know, it just makes me, at the end of the meeting, it makes me sit up higher. And it's something I take with me after meetings are over. And here are a few. The one I'm working on is boundaries. I really struggle with boundaries. One of the boundaries I'm working on right now is with my husband, who is not happy to be in a 30-day recovery place and wants to come home. And it's like, I have to keep my boundary and telling him, you've got to do this. And I have a sponsor said today, next time he calls, think about, do you want to kill him? And I'm thinking, okay, that really helped, because if he comes home and starts drinking again, he's going to die. It's just going to happen. And so that's helping me to keep that boundary of saying, no, I'm not going to come get you. Some of my other favorite ones, I have a right to be here, to exist. I'm grateful for that. I am a worthwhile person. I love myself unconditionally. One of my favorites, I am enough. I have enough. I'm capable of changing. A lot of them are about, with my higher power, all good things are possible. Here's another one that I think is I'm really grateful to have. I can say yes to what I want and no to what I don't want. The choice is mine. And that one is one that I need to keep repeating, because sometimes I forget. And that's about all in those, but I could just keep reading them, and I feel good about all of those. But my gratitude for CODA is, again, I feel like I'm living life, not just surviving. I feel like I can make my own decisions. I just feel valuable. I feel valued. I had a job where I felt about 2 inches high by some people. And there's times where I think, oh, I'd like to go back there now and see, and practice with these people. But I'm glad I don't have to. I'm retired now. So, but I will continue to have challenges. I will continue to go to meetings. I'll continue to work on my recovery. And really grateful for this meeting. I've been coming on this meeting for just about the 2.5 years that I've been in CODA recovery. And one of these days I'll go to an in-person meeting, but the Saturday meeting, this one is one of my favorites. So really grateful to be here and thank you.